Hey guys, JamesMCD Reviews here. I know I primarily talk about movies and TV shows, but every once in a while I like to diversify the type of media that I cover on my channel. From books to video games to the subject of today's video, live sporting events. Yes, today I'm going to be talking about Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson, the most anticipated boxing event that no one asked for. It happened last night in Arlington, Texas, and was streamed live on Netflix, and I watched it. For some reason. Now, ever since this fight was announced, it seemed like everyone had something to say about it. There were a lot of concerns regarding not only Mike's age, but Mike's health coming into this fight. The fight had to be pushed back from June to November because Mike had a stomach ulcer. And a lot of people were like, okay, this is your cue to cancel this fight. Like, this should not go ahead by any means. And a lot of people just kind of looked at it as a lose-lose for Jake Paul, who has already been criticized before about only fighting 40-year-old retired MMA fighters and boxers and everything like that. If he goes in there and knocks out Mike Tyson in one round, it's not like he's knocking out 20-year-old Mike Tyson from the 90s. He's knocking out a 58-year-old Mike Tyson, who is well past his prime. But if he goes in there and gets his ass kicked by Mike Tyson, then what? Not only has he lost to a boxer again, but he's lost to someone who's like 30 plus years older than him. But annoyingly enough, it's that allure and those questions of like, what if? What could happen? What does Mike still have it? That made this fight so intriguing, even if you didn't like it. And because it was free to watch on Netflix, it was shaping up to be one of the most easily accessible fight cards of all time. In theory. We'll get to the actual fight in just a second, but I do want to talk about the streaming experience because this was absolutely annoying. Evidently, it seems like everyone was aware of how big this fight was going to be and how many eyes were going to be on it, except for Netflix themselves. The first two fights on the card looked fine, they ran really smoothly, they looked great, but then as soon as it got to the co-main event and the main event, which I'm assuming is where everyone else switched on, because those were the only two fights that people cared about, everything went to shit. It was buffering, it was laggy, the site crashed multiple times, and this was a worldwide thing. Everyone was pretty much everyone was having this issue because there were like posts about it and everything. I kept having to like close out and reopen my Netflix and have to like do the internet connection like test or whatever, and it was annoying. Like, I was trying to record like my live reaction to the co-main and the main event to have like interspersed throughout this video, but it was just hard to do when like every like 5 minutes it would, you know, freeze up and you would get that fucking spiraling red circle that was perpetually stuck at 25%.
You know, if you squint hard enough, it kind of looks like a fight is happening.
Eventually, because it was taking so long to like fix itself, and because by that point I knew the results of the co-main and the main event anyway, I just decided to say fuck it and wait for everyone else to go to sleep and rewatch the bits that I missed after the fact. But yeah, Netflix, seriously, if you are ever going to host any more live events or live boxing events ever again, you need to get your servers figured out, because that was fucking ridiculous. I mean, you charge more than enough for your service that you should be able to afford, you know, an internet connection that doesn't crap out on you when the two most important fights are about to happen. Anyway, now that we got that rant out of the way, let's move on to the fights themselves, starting with the main event of Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson. Going into this, everyone seemed to have two like scenarios in their heads when they were making their predictions. Either Mike was gonna channel all of his energy and power into those first two rounds, and he was gonna manage to catch Jake with something early and finish it, or Jake was going to weather the storm and wait for Mike to tire out and knock him out in the later rounds. So what ended up happening? Well, Mike did use up all his energy in those first two rounds, and Jake did, you know, wait for Mike to gas out, but it didn't really seem like either man was going for the knockout. I mean, Mike definitely wasn't, because by the time like the third round came around, he was just way too tired and just kind of in survival mode, even though he did catch Jake with a couple of like well-placed shots. But Jake didn't seem to have that like kill mentality that he had in his previous fights either. Like, he did get Mike with a lot of really heavy shots, but for the most part he would just like stay on the outside, pick his shots strategically, and then move out of the way, eventually winning by unanimous decision. And it's not like he wasn't trying to engage because he was worried about getting hurt, although I'm sure that did play a small factor in some way. It seemed like he just genuinely did not want to hurt Mike. I am kind of torn on this outcome, to be honest. I mean, on the one hand, like, for both guys, this is probably like the best, in quotes, case scenario, because I mean, Jake gets to continue bragging about how he put Mike Tyson on his resume, and Mike gets to go home safely to his family without having sustained any real long-term damage. But on the other hand, it made for a pretty boring and honestly kind of sad to watch fight. And I mean, don't get me wrong, it still would have been sad to watch had Jake just like said hell for leather and started teeing off on Mike and eventually knocking him out, but like, it would have at least provided a more emotional response than just kind of like seeing Mike just like sort of hobble around and like bob his head like kind of aimlessly back and forth, and you know, eventually get in like the occasional like jab or like heavy 1-2 or whatever. And I know they're playing up sort of this like narrative of like, oh, Mike is supposed to be, you know, like an inspiration to like how you can do anything regardless of how old you get, as long as you like work hard and put your mind to it and everything like that. And I mean, yeah, that might be true, and you know, obviously you have to respect Mike for even getting in there when he doesn't really need to or shouldn't, but I feel like that sentiment would have meant more had he actually like done more. If he, you know, was a little bit more active, if like both guys were like treating this like a professional fight and not, you know, like a sparring match essentially, and like actually trying to hurt the other, which I know there's that mutual respect, but still, it would have brought more weight to the mentality of like, oh shit, this guy at 58, you know, is doing more than most guys at that age and blah blah blah. But yeah, look, I mean, it's sad to see Mike lose, especially in such an anticlimactic way, but I mean, you do have to give some respect to Jake a little bit for, you know, like recognizing not to completely pull the trigger, because let's be honest, he could have ended that fight way earlier if he really wanted to, but I think we're all kind of glad that he didn't. And even though like I've, you know, talk shit about it, like I do genuinely like respect Mike for getting in there and, you know, giving it his best. I do hope that this is the last time that he is in a fight. Like, I know he was talking about how he might not be done just yet, and he was teasing the idea of fighting Logan, but we cannot let that happen, please. There were some really good fights on the undercard, which was probably the most like legitimate aspect of this entire event. Whindersson Nunes versus Norige Goyat was equal parts entertaining and embarrassing. I don't know how we were all tricked into thinking Whindersson Nunes was like the second coming of Christ in terms of influencer boxing, just because he did kind of well on his first fight on Kingpin, because every single fight since then he has done absolutely nothing. And Norige Goyat was literally just throwing arm punches and showboating and, you know, not really giving Nunes anything to worry about. So it was just an all-around like annoying fight. Mario Barrios and Abel Ramos fought it out for the welterweight championship, and that was a really, really good fight. It was action-packed. It was very technical. It was very even as well. You had Barrios catching Ramos with a really good knockdown in the second round and dominating like the first half of the fight, and then as soon as Ramos started to figure out his footing and get his timing right, he caught Barrios with a knockdown in, I believe, the sixth round, and he was, you know, starting to pick up the pace and dominating the later rounds, and it did end in a draw, but I wasn't disappointed by it because I thought it was a really good, really close fight. And then the co-main event, Katie Taylor versus Amanda Serrano rematch, was every bit as electric as the first fight. And much like the first fight, Amanda Serrano got robbed yet again. You have to give a hats off to both fighters. Like, they were both, you know, in there to win. But at the same time, Katie Taylor was like winning by like the skin of her teeth, and she was also like leading with her head a lot of the time, and I know that happens when you're fighting southpaw sometimes, but like after that cut opened up, it seemed like she was like going for it intentionally a lot of times. Plus she got a point deducted, so like with those kinds of numbers and with Serrano dominating a majority of those rounds, I scored it 6-4 to Serrano. But like even if you did it 5-5 with the point deducted, I still think Serrano like won that fight. But I don't know, I don't know what's going through the judges' heads and everything like that. So yeah, overall, a bit of a mixed bag of an event. There were some really, really good fights mixed with a couple of like kind of fights. And then of course the main event, which was kind of just depressing to watch, to be honest. I do hope that Netflix gets their shit together if they, ever want to do more live events, because that was a fucking headache to watch. To have it crash out at the most important like moment of the night. A lot went wrong that shouldn't have gone wrong. And I know they were probably trying their best, but they should have been prepared for like, how much traction this was gonna get. But yeah, let me know in the comments, what did you think of Jake Paul, Mike Tyson if you watched it? Are you satisfied with the result? Did you think it was a good fight? What did you think of the other fights on the undercard? What would you like to see come out of Netflix in terms of live events? And where do you think Jake Paul goes as a boxer? It didn't really seem like he had any like clear clue as to where he wanted to go next. Maybe he's just like taking a break afterwards, but I don't know. Let me know all that stuff down below. I do have more videos coming soon, but it's just been kind of a stressful week, and I haven't really I've been behind on like watching a lot of stuff, so it'll be a couple more days before you get my penguin video, so I apologize. But until then, be sure to like, subscribe, ring the notification bell so you can stay up to date on when I'm posting. Follow me on my social media, subscribe to my main channel. Everything you need to know will be in the description. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you later.